When you're starting out, using something with too many options is not a good idea. Like a Pro Q3 is everyone's favorite EQ, or anything that has the ability for you to select an unnumbered amount of frequency points, unlimited. Just you could do 10, 12, 15, boost cut at all of them, change the curve on all of them, change how many dB per octave the curve is on all of them. Why would you want to give yourself all these options? That's like somebody who has a closet full of stuff and they can't wear the same thing every day. So now they're forced to put themselves through this ridiculous task of picking what they're going to wear every day. It's so much easier if you have a uniform to just get up and go to work. And that's what we're doing. It's not a fashion show. It's how to get to the end result quickly. So the goal is which tools get us there, and especially as you're a beginner, you got to use stuff if you're a beginner or intermediate on that earlier level where you don't really know what's going on, but you know what sounds good to you. Use something that helps you. Like a 1073 by Neve is my favorite EQ, one of, and I mean, in the real world, it's my favorite one. But in the box, I like the 550B. I don't own one of those, in the outboard world. I just like it because it gives you a frequency point selection, 4 different, like highs, mids, highs, high mids, low mids, and lows. And it allows you to basically just dial in what you want in a way that makes sense. If you put a bunch of 550Bs on your stuff, you'll be able to make it make sense like building blocks. You're boosting here, you're cutting there, and that makes sense because you can't boost a ton of stuff in the same frequency range. So it just makes sense where they pick the points. Just like a Pultec EQ makes sense where they pick the points and how wide that curve is, and when you attenuate, what it does, the way it attenuates, it's brilliant. You might as well use it. Also, let's translate this to compression. Don't use 100 compressors. Use like 3 or 4. Get good with them. In my opinion, when starting out, the most useful ones were the 1176. I love that one to this day. The LA2A, so critical to get comfortable with these different kinds because that's a slower one, and the 1176 super fast. The Fairchild is a great one just for the way things sound when you run through it. The Shadow Hills compressor is my probably new favorite. And it's just because I like the way things sound when the needle's barely moving. Just selecting the transformers in the thing sound great. There's so many different things that, like, if you just get comfortable with those, get comfortable with like a 2254 or a DBX, like a 160, 165. They're very spitty style. They work very quick. I mean, they have a cool sound to them. If you just got comfortable with those, you'd be doing way better than getting comfortable with 150 of them. Like, there's no real reason to do that, okay? Same with tape machines. Like, they all have a slightly different sound, sure, but get comfortable with like 2 or 3, and you're way better off. All right, so I like Oxide tape, the UAD one. That's a great one. I also, if you have Waves plugins, what is it? The Kramer tape is one of my favorites. So let's move off this for a second. I'm trying to make I'm trying to make mixes in headphones now, today, because my room is great. My setup's solid. I love my NS10s. I love my Barefoot 01s, and I got my room treatment figured out. I got my distance from where I'm sitting and the speakers pointed figured out. I got so many things figured out with the room, where the sub is. It's going great. But I also want to set myself up to be able to mix in a hotel, on a plane, in a car. Like, I'm not just trying to make it harder. I'm trying to hone my abilities in the places that I don't have super skills in, like mixing in headphones. That's its own thing. People can be good at that who can't mix with speakers in a room, and vice versa. I find it's easier for me now to mix with speakers in the room, so I'm trying to work at the headphone game, get great in there, because that allows you more freedom. So I want to give you the history of where I started on headphones. I originally started with the Sony Studio Professional ones that everyone has. Like, they're $100. I'm sure like most of you have tried them or seen them. They're the ones Andrew Sheps uses. Very, very common headphones, and they're fine. There's nothing wrong with them, but they're super bright and they don't give you so much low end information. Like, it's less. You should note that when you're mixing, the reason I like NS10s is because to make things sound great on them translates well to the rest of the world. So it's not just this clear-cut, dry picture of it sounds good in here, now it sounds good out there. You almost want your speakers to give you something where you have to make it work on them and then it will translate. So that comes from trying things out, because everyone's ear is different. So you could listen on something and make it sound good to you on something, and that could not translate to the world. Somebody else could use the same headphones. It sounds good to them, and it does translate to the world. It's all about your ears. I heard a thing once where Chad Blake was talking to Andrew Sheps, and they were in the same room. They both had their headphones, and they were listening to a mix that was finished, and they said, let's switch headphones. So they switch. Andrew could not hear what was going on Chad's headphones. They were so dark to him, so dark that he was like, oh man, if he was listening, he would have made a ton of changes based on that. Chad couldn't listen on Andrew's headphones. They were way too bright. Chad was like cringing his face. He couldn't deal with it because it was too bright. So my point is, this concept of everybody need like the same work, it doesn't. You got to figure out what your ears like in order for, and what will translate based on what your ears like means. Your ears liking something or not means you're making changes to accommodate that. And then what happens in the world? So there's like an equation that happens based on your headphones and your ears in order to get to the real world. It's not the same for everybody. That's why, anything that's like, any concept where somebody tells you that the same thing will work for everyone is just not true. Yes, there are averages where like a lot of people like something. Let me give you an example of that, okay? So I started with those Sonys. Then I bought these Beyerdynamic 770 Pros because my thing was I couldn't really hear enough low end in my room. This was when I had my room set up in the other room here. I have a live room and a control room, and at one point they were swapped. So I basically had a room that was wider than this one. This one's narrower and longer, but that other room I was in was way wider. And what I found was the bass got lost. I also didn't have a great subwoofer at the time. So, and I had the Barefoot L1s, but only at the end of being in that room. So most of the time in there, I didn't have a great speaker to reproduce low end. So I was just losing a lot of low end. So I'm like, I got to fix this because my mixes weren't translating when I get to the car. So I bought these 770 Pros and I got comfortable with them because you can get comfortable using anything. And these worked for a while, and you've seen me wear these on almost every video because I love these things. I'm still comfortable in them, but I could tell, I just had a feeling, I could tell, whatever you want to say, that they were missing something. And again, this is not a paid promotion. This has nothing to do with a sponsorship of any kind. This is just me kind of giving you where I'm at and just talking you through what I like, what I don't like, and maybe this will help you in some way. These 770 Pros, they sound great, a lot of low end, a little bit of boost in the highs. This actually works for my mixing style because I don't like a lot of high end. So this thing gave me enough high end where I would never feel like I needed to add any. And I was usually happy with the way they translated, but I noticed I'd make moves sometimes and they weren't crystal clear. I couldn't exactly tell how much was changing or this or that. And it was a thing where I'd take these off and I could clearly hear it on my NS10s. Put these on, I couldn't really hear it. So I was like, okay, they're missing something. And I knew that. I pulled out a pair of headphones that I got actually prior to those. I got these, but I never liked them. And what I realized was I had to learn how to get good on the NS10s, and I never spent enough time learning how to get good on these. One day I will, probably still, but I haven't yet. The Focal Spirits, these were like $300 headphones. For whatever reason, I never really liked them. And I think the reason is because they do sound like flat monitors in a room, but they're not exciting to listen to at all. Like there's not a lot of low end, so I never got enough of that low end. That's just why I went for the 770s. Those Beyerdynamics, they have much more low end than these. So I was like, these are good, but they're super flat and everything was just kind of lame in them and I didn't love it. So I stopped using these, but what I noticed is if I put these on now, they probably sound closest to my NS10s of everything I own. Just wearing these is the closest experience to an NS10. So maybe when I got used to the NS10s, I never retried these long enough to know, but I'm probably gonna within the next couple of days just to make sure that these aren't like my missing link for being able to mix in headphones well. These are the Focal Spirits, and they were like $300. I then recently decided, I'm going to try the LCDXs that everyone talks about. That's these giant bricks that you've seen on everyone's head who's in the mixing industry, mastering. I mean, these are very, very popular headphones, very popular, and they're great. I know why now. I never knew before. Now I do, because everything in them sounds crystal clear, super great amount of low end. And a lot of that comes from how big these headphones are. Like they really go around your ear. So when I'm wearing these, it feels like there's a lot of space around my ear. And the top end is nice and clear. The mid-range isn't too pushed, and the low end is expansive, and you hear it. It's super clear low end, okay? And a lot of it. Now, I also tried at the same time these Manny Marroquins. Now, I'm not keeping both of these. I'm keeping one of them, but I'm deciding between the two. And this comes back to the EQ thing we talked about. If I just had any one of these, either one, I loved it because I started using the Manny Marroquins and was like, wow, this is great. These are awesome. Then I put these LCDXs on. I'm like, uh-oh, I like these better, the LCDXs. Now, I didn't know that without the comparison, but what I found was, for my ears, the Manny Marroquins have more mid-range, no question. They're also lighter weight, but that more mid-range makes it where the low end in these feels like it's not as much. You don't hear as much low end, and I'm looking all the time for something that I can really get the full low end experience so that I know how to dial in the low end, because that's usually the biggest problem most people experience when they're mixing. And it's something that took me a long time to get my room in a position where I could make the low end great. So I was always like focused on that with almost every pair of headphones I've ever bought. Like, how do I get the most sounding low, like the clearest low end and the most of it so I can really hear everything, because you can't mix what you can't hear. So if I heard the most low end, I can make the best decisions on low end. That's why if I had to pick between the two, I'd say the LCDXs at this point are better for me. Why? Because the Manny Marroquins, they're a little bit smaller in the can department. I don't know if you could tell. The cans themselves, like, let me just try to give you a comparison that makes any sense. They're not much different, but like these are the LCDXs. You could see they're a little bigger than, the Manny Marroquins. I just like the way they feel on my head better also. In other words, I mixed with these on for like an hour or so. I mixed with these on for an hour or so. The Manny's are a little tighter and actually like impede into my ear a little bit where they're sitting on it. Whereas these completely wrap around it. The LCDXs because they're bigger, they get way around it. It feels better on my head. So even though they're heavier, it doesn't really matter. Also, the low end being a little more present makes for a better listening experience to me. I like these better. Also, the mid-range not being as pushed as they are in the Manny's made it where, the tinnitus that creeps in on me when my ears experience fatigue from listening at a loud volume, that tinnitus that creeps in is less apparent when I use these. I can mix for longer on the LCDXs than I can on the Manny Marroquins without that ringing becoming a problem. And that's definitely about those mid-range frequencies coming out and biting me, in my opinion. I mean, I'm not an expert on it. All I know is I did both. The ringing crept up quicker with the Manny's than it did on the LCDXs. And just the clarity in the low end is enough really for me to want these other ones more, because it just made for a more enjoyable experience. So I'll sacrifice the fact that they're heavier. They're also older. They've been around for a long time, but that doesn't necessarily mean bad. Just look at an Eve 1073. Why is it that the company that bought the rights to that still sells a ton of them? It's not because it's a magic that people are just attracted to the magic. There is a magic within the thing, but it's not a fictitious magic. It's a real magic. Every once in a while, manufacturers hit the nail on the head. And in my opinion, that's what Audi's did with these LCDXs. They really kind of did something magical, and it's apparent with me when I switch between these two. It's very apparent that the Manny's are great, and if I just had one, I would use probably the Manny's and never look back, because that's what I did for a couple days, and I was like, these are great. But just switching over to the LCDXs, they feel a little better. I don't experience that painful mid-range ringing that I would through the Manny's, and it seems like things are translating great, because that's the last thing. Figuring out that you can make great mixes and that they translate is the final step. So once you get over the comfort level, once you get over the way you're listening to you sounds good or bad, does that experience in the headphones mean that it translates is the next thing. Everybody keep in mind, you can't have an SPL meter for sound level in your head. So when you're wearing headphones, it's very hard to tell how loud you're mixing. And I think this is also a problem that people experience. They mix way too loud when they wear headphones because it's not the same experience as listening in a room. So you have the tendency to turn them way up to feel better about the music. Well, what I would tell you is you got to do, this is a concept a lot of people use. Fab DuPont talked about this. A lot of people use this concept. You put your speakers that you're listening on in your room at the volume you usually set it with your SPL meter or whatever. I use like around, in the 70, 75, 79 dB is actually what I like. I like it low. I've talked about this before. That's, to me, is good. I get it where I like it. Then I put the headphones on and I try to make it where it's the same volume. That's the trick, is like you wear the headphones, is it the same volume as when you take them off in the room? Because if it's not, then that's why you got to lower or make it louder. A lot of people will make your headphones way too loud. And if you're doing this test on your volume setup with the SPL meter in the room and then you put your headphones on and you need to lower your headphones a ton, you're mixing too loud. You'll experience ear fatigue quicker and then you'll just be making decisions that aren't on point. So it's okay to turn things up to test stuff, but in my opinion, wherever you're comfortable in your room, it should be a very similar volume in the headphones. That's my opinion, all right? And I'm on the phase now where I'm seeing if these translate just as good as the Mannies do to real life, because I tried that with the Mannies where I made a couple mixes like on my speakers, then I put on the Mannies, and then I went to the real world in the car in different places, and they sounded great. Like, it worked. Okay, but now I got to make sure the LCDXs do the same thing, and then I'll know for sure. But I'm at the place now where just comparing a finished mix on both, I'm happier with the listening experience in the LCDXs. Whereas on the Mannies, things sound a little less bright and a little less low end. And, in my opinion, I prefer to hear it with a little more low end and a little more bright. And I don't want to put it there. Whereas if I was mixing on the Mannies, I'd have put a little more low end and a little more brightness on it, and that might not have been good. So, in my opinion, try it out. Figure out what works for your ears. There is no right answer. That's why I'm in this position where I started with the Sonys, which are now decrepit, and they need new pairs because they're falling apart because they've been around forever. Can't even show you those because if I held them up, they'd just be disintegrating in my hand. Then I went to the Focal Spirits, which I never really liked and always felt a bit by that purchase because it was $300. Then I went to the Beyerdynamic 770 Pros. Then, I felt like I would make a couple decisions in the mix and I couldn't really hear them enough. So I was like, man, I can't stick with these. I got to get something a little better. I need a fine-tuned device here so I can master stuff and hear every little tweak. Even if I go 1 dB, I want to hear it. So that's when I switched to these Audis. And in my opinion, right now, I'm leaning towards the LCDXs. I'll let you know, again, this is not a sponsorship at all. Anybody in the high-end headphone market, I hope you appreciate this. And if you're not there, you may be there one day. So I hope you took it in. I hope you dug it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Throw any kind of comment in the comment section because that's where I get my ideas for videos. Hit the like button if you dug it. Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. You guys got this. Take it easy.